the table when you're ready. Thank you.
Is this on? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bradley Myles. I currently serve as the CEO of Polaris. I'm a 15-year resident of DC, and I helped start the DC Human Trafficking Task Force in 2004. So the questions that you all ask about combating human trafficking in DC and prosecutions, I'd love to talk to you about that because I helped to start the task force in 2004. Polaris is a DC-based national anti-trafficking organization that's been combating human trafficking in DC and on a national scale for the past 17 years. As the operator of the country's national human trafficking hotline, we've stayed open nonstop 24/7 for the past 12 years working on trafficking. We've worked on over 50,000 instances of human trafficking since 2007. We're opposed to the bill that's being discussed here today. We believe it'll lead to an increase in human trafficking in the city. We stand alongside the survivor leaders and other advocates who've testified to the City Council about this. First, I'd like to start by asking everyone here in this room to carefully listen to the survivors of trafficking who've spoken about this bill. Mr. Allen, you spoke about the diametrically opposed opinions. I think it's very clear that with this bill, the authors consulted heavily with the Sex Workers Advocacy Coalition. You heard plenty from that side. I don't think you heard enough from the side of sex trafficking survivors. I think you heard from a few survivors along the way, but you haven't consulted anywhere near enough, and you haven't clearly consulted the majority view of survivors. So please listen to more survivors as you're working on this bill. Notice how many anti-trafficking advocates and how many anti-trafficking survivors are speaking out against this bill. That should tell you something. You talk about not wanting to do any harm with this bill. People are coming here to tell you that real harm will happen if you pass this bill. Mr. Grosso, I'm interested in this morning. I was here sitting, and it was interesting to me that each time a survivor of trafficking came up and spoke, you argued with them after their testimony, almost as if you thought you knew better about what it would take to stop trafficking than they did when they've lived it and they've dedicated their lives to it. Ponder this. Traffickers and buyers prefer the policy that you're advancing with this bill. How does that sit with you? You keep citing that trafficking laws will stay on the books as a result of this bill, as if the existence of a law on the books somehow meaningfully equates to stopping something. We have laws on the books against discrimination. So if that were enough, why is discrimination still rampant today? We have laws on the books against sexual harassment and sexual assault. If that were enough, why is it still rampant today? The notion that we could pass this bill, keep certain trafficking laws on the books, and still effectively stop sex trafficking in DC while green lighting a growing market of sex buying, making the overall sex trade larger, worse, and more dangerous, misunderstands the nature of trafficking, what it takes to stop it, and the new market dynamics that the bill unleashes. What's being really debated here today is not whether or not sex work should be a crime or not. I don't hear anybody advocating for that. So what's really being debated here is whether or not pimping and procuring and brothels and sex buying should be a crime or not, what the effects are of those changes, and who really stands to benefit. The part of the bill that amends the pandering and procuring statute so that now when a third party arranging for another person to engage in prostitution, as long as they're freely and voluntarily engaging, that's the part that legalizes pimping. So if you ask, does this bill legalize pimping or not? If it says to the 18-year-olds, if you're engaging and arranging for someone freely and voluntarily, that's legalizing pimping. And Mr. Grosso, you just defended and advocated for that a few hours ago. If the central concern of many people here today is the criminal arrests of people in prostitution and the interactions with law enforcement, that's a valid concern. It's a concern that I share. And it's one concern that we could all rally around, is taking one clear step. And like Mrs. Nadeau said, we're not satisfied with the status quo, so we need to take one clear step. Why don't we take one clear step? But instead of taking one clear step, what we're doing is launching 5 policy experiments all at the same time on pimping, procuring, buying, brothels, trafficking, selling, all with unknown outcomes, all without creating a single penny of new resources and programs and supports for vulnerable and affected populations. The t-shirts over here say sex workers deserve housing and not handcuffs. The bill doesn't create any housing for sex workers. It doesn't actually create any new supports. It doesn't create any new programs, any new supports. That's too big.
I have already said, I don't know how many times if I'm going to have to stop the hearing. I'm asking this. This is going to be the last time I'm asking, or else I'm going to be forced to have to stop the hearing. I do not want to do that because there's so many people that have taken time out and want to have their voices heard. So please, please.
Why did you prioritize people from out of town?
I,
I'll answer that. You want to know why? Because
no, hang on. Let me. I want to make sure it's clear when we talked earlier about how the hearing goes. People sign up for a hearing, and they get put in the order in which people sign up. There's no prioritization of that. If you want to be able to finish, please do.
Sure. So guess what? Survivors of trafficking get moved around the country. There are people from other parts of the country who are also victimized in DC. DC is not its own little island. So when people are watching this bill, they realize it has ripple effects to the other parts of the country. So other parts of the country will be affected by this bill. So when people try to come in here, it is Polaris's view that it is imperative that you not pass this bill. If you do, it will create real harm. Listen to the wisdom of survivor leaders. You've heard clearly from the Sex Workers Advocacy Coalition. You've heard for it for 3 years. You've heard it from Darby for 3 years. You have not heard from enough survivors of trafficking. Listen to those survivors of trafficking, believe them, and know that they're here telling you that trafficking will get worse as a result of this bill, and hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.